what happens if you refuse a C-section for a breech baby, the uncensored version. This was inside a mom group, okay? So I'm just going to be very clear on that. I'm sometimes a fly on the wall in these groups to see what's really going on. Because oftentimes what happens is that you hear one thing out there in the pristine, polished, censored version of birth, and you see it in the books, and you'll see it on all the brochures or what they'll say to your face. But behind closed doors, there are some people that really, really show their hand. And this particular labor and delivery nurse, oh, she showed her hand. Don't worry, I got the receipts. I won't name names because I don't do that. I don't blast people. I don't ruin their jobs. But I seriously think that she needs to rethink her vocation, and I told her so. I pointed out that the Hippocratic Oath means do no harm, and she's doing harm with what she said. In fact, any mom who's seeing that, who feels as I do about bodily autonomy, is probably going to be absolutely horrified and be like, this is exactly why I choose not to step foot in the hospital for birth. All right, so here's the thing. You often hear, well, what happens if I have a breech baby and I don't want a C-section and the medical system says I have no choice? Could I show up at the hospital in labor and just keep declining a C-section and force them to assist me? And a lot of moms get this wrong. They think, oh, I'll just show up at the hospital in labor and I'll just hold my own the whole time. This is exactly why one of my things that I say to all moms who want to aim for a true natural birth is to stay home until the last possible minute. I cannot stress this enough. Prepare for an unassisted birth. Prepare for somebody to come to you. Prepare for them to basically have to get out of their comfort zone and assist you because baby's coming now. Not an hour from now, not 2 hours from now, not even 30 minutes from now, because that's even enough time for them to push that baby back up and give you a C-section anyway. It's been done. I've seen it. I've heard it. It's happened. So you've got to be very, very clear that your body is physiologically able to do this with or without medical assistance. They're backup. If you truly want your autonomy in such a hostile environment when you have no other choice, you have to be prepared to go it alone. This is not ideal. This is not fair. This is not right that this happens. And when we take a stand, when we're really confident, things will naturally shift because they'll have to. Now, if you can't do that, if you have other options, if you're like, there actually is a breech provider that could assist me, that's just I have to drive a little bit further, sometimes you need to make that sacrifice. And maybe it's that you have a midwife who's like, well, I have the breech skills, but I'm technically not allowed to use them. Well, if you call her at the last minute while you're at home, she has to come to you and nobody will know. Nobody has to know. But she has those skills. You do want somebody who has the skills. At the same time, we're in a mess. Because you know what this labor and delivery nurse said? She's like, it is incredibly difficult and it's time consuming. However, we can petition the courts to overrule a mother's rights if we feel that we can present the evidence that this baby is in danger if they stay where they are, and if she doesn't have a C-section, we can override her rights. But usually by that point, it's too late. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay. And then she goes further into this, and she's like, but normally what we would do is if she's not in full labor, if the baby's not coming right away, we would probably try to persuade her to change her mind. And we'd probably send her home if she's not in full active labor and persuade her again to change her mind. This is code for harass her, wear her down, tire her out when she's trying everything to just stay calm and stay in her element. No, we're just going to wear her down until she gets to the point where she's like, oh, it would be easier for me to just do the C-section than to keep dealing with this harassment. I mean, the midwives and doctors that a client of mine had last year tried to do the same thing, tried to wear her down into a C-section for her fourth baby, because she had 3 previous C-sections before, and she was going for her 4th baby, and she didn't want a C-section, and they were wearing her down. And this is why I told her, it's like, hey, you're gonna have to make a choice here. Do you really want to even go to the hospital? It's like, no, I don't. And she ended up going in later, but she'd already been so strong in her resolve not to have a C-section that she convinced them to leave her alone unless there was an actual emergency. However, it's also incredibly stressful to do that, and you need a lot of skills in emotional regulation, and you need to have your protector, your partner there, and preferably a doula as well to keep you guys sane in order for that to even work. And you shouldn't have to fight, beg, or compromise with the medical system. They should just be supporting you. But this labor and delivery nurse, of course, she showed her hand. And she's like, well, like we would wear her down, or we would override her rights. And she'd get a C-section. Because we have to make sure that we have done everything right. And I call this white coat savior syndrome. Because it's like, oh, we have to save the baby. And I pointed out, it's like, okay, but what about the mother's trauma? What about the mother's body? What about the mother's feelings on this? What about the mother's long-term health complications of having this C-section that you feel is more necessary than letting her make her own decision? And then she goes back and says, well, if a mother is going to be selfish and choose herself over her baby, then you won't change my mind on this. I think that that's the most selfish thing, and something has to be done. Please, please, please try to explain to me how that doesn't sound exactly like Aunt Lydia from Handmaid's Tale. Like, honestly. So I looked at that. I'm like, okay, well, you need to be like out of that profession. It's like you need to choose a new vocation then if that's how you feel. Because your Hippocratic oath says do no harm. And that is doing harm. Psychological trauma of being pushed into a C-section. You said no. And they've now overridden your rights. And now you're strapped to the bed, strapped to the table, and being cut open against your will. You're telling me that's not psychological trauma that's going to carry for a long time? You're telling me that the cutting into somebody is not going to cause them long-term complications? I mean, mothers who choose C-sections still can have long-term complications. Mothers who need emergency C-sections still can have long-term complications. One of my best friends, Christine, who I've written about inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, she had 1 C-section. It went very well. And at the same time, she lives with dense adhesions from it. And she went on to have a VBAC at home. So the thing is, like, even 1 C-section can cause problems. So now you're forcing a C-section on somebody? And you think you're justified in that? This is exactly why the Empowered Birth Movement exists. Because I'm aiming with every book sale, every course sale, every program sale to be able to put the money towards getting these kinds of people out of the freaking medical system, raising awareness for it, getting people on committees to enforce different rules, to be like, you can't force a mother into a C-section. You can't petition the courts anymore. That's not allowed. Like, that mother retains all her rights. You can't do that. Creating birth houses so that there is a safer place that's close to a hospital. If home birth is not accessible, but closer to a hospital, they rent the space out. It's theirs. It's like an Airbnb for birth. And they could go there and be like, okay, do I even want to go to the hospital? No, I'm just going to have my baby here. Nothing's going wrong. They have their baby, they have the backup of the medical system, but they're not pushed into anything. Right now, it's so difficult because They're being told, oh, well, you can't have a home birth, you're risking out. Oh, you can't have a birth center birth, you're risked out. And they have all these protocols in the hospital that if a mother comes in and she doesn't want to have a C-section for a breech baby, well, we're just going to go and petition the courts then. We're just going to wear you down. We're just going to scare you. We're going to manipulate you into this because we don't want to learn the skills. No, I'm done with that. I'm seriously done with that. So the thing is that I have now put my book on YouTube. Because I am seriously done with this. Like, I shouldn't have had to argue this woman's, I shouldn't have had to point out just how messed up that attitude is. And she still doesn't see it. She still doesn't see how traumatizing a mother is worse than allowing her to have her autonomy and maybe the baby is in danger. Maybe. Very unlikely. No mother is truly going to put her child in danger. That's not a thing. We have more of a vested interest. However, if it comes down to it's there's a possibility my child could die, but there's also a possibility that this could scar me even worse. I'm going to choose me. I'm sorry. I'm going to choose me. You know why? Because I have other children to take care of. I can't risk myself being, I can't. I'm sorry. But I cannot do that. I have other children to take care of. And I'm not going to sacrifice myself on the altar of motherhood. So if it comes down to me, or it comes down to possibly maybe saving the baby or losing us both, because C-sections, again, are not just oh, well, it's a C-section, it doesn't matter. No, people die. Especially the Black women in the community, I've seen this. They have 3 times more likely a chance of death for mother and baby. This happens. And we just gloss it over because C-sections are life-saving? No! Okay? No more. I'm done. So thank you for listening to my rant. If you're completely pissed off at me, go ahead and talk in the comments, because you know what? I am always happy to go into a debate. And if you are also feeling yeah, you're right on the money, you can also put a comment in. The louder the voices are, the more they get listened to. And I think it's time that the right voices get listened to. The ones of the mothers who don't want to be traumatized. And if you're still on the fence about this and you're well, babies' lives are important and so are the mothers, but I don't know if this is a very unethical thing. I can't figure out the dilemma here, which side to choose. I'm going to ask you this. If you were pregnant and somebody decided that you had to have a C-section and you knew that this would cause you lifetime health complications, that this could possibly cause you to lose your uterus so you couldn't have any more children, that this could cause you to bleed out and die, that this could cause you lifelong trauma, that this could cause you to have a disconnection from your body, that this could seriously harm you and possibly even cut your baby, and you had to be forced into that, if somebody decided to put a judge on that and force you into that, I'm just going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, how traumatic do you think that would be for you? And how well would you recover? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you say, yeah, sign me up for that? The choice is obvious. If you don't want it done to you, don't do it to other people. Do unto others what you would want done to yourself. You can't get any more simple than that. Seriously. I can't believe I even had to argue this with somebody who took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. It's just horrifying. And that's what we're really dealing with. That's what's really behind the curtain. There are people out there who really do believe that as my friend Dawn Thompson had once said, I think it was her, or maybe it was Kristen Pascucci. It's on the blog on improvingbirth.org. And it's basically, the baby is the candy and the mother is the wrapper. We're not disposable. We don't deserve this. It's time to take a stand. The empowered birth movement is taking a stand. I am taking a stand. I said earlier at the start of 2024, I was taking the gloves off, and I meant it. So, since I'm taking a stand, I'm just going to let you know that I've got my book on YouTube now. No excuses. If you can't get a copy of the book, if you don't have time to read the book, you can now listen to the book. You can watch it. It's on video. I have read it on video. You can share that with anybody. You can share chapters with anybody. You can get this out there. Some of the chapters, yes, they're long. And this is the best education that you could possibly get to protect yourself. I'm not going to sugarcoat this here. This is a fight. This is a fight for autonomy, and you've seen it. You've seen what's been happening. Do you want a freaking Handmaid's Tale? Because that kind of looks like the direction that we could go in if we keep allowing this medical system to petition the courts to force us into C-sections, force us into inductions, force us into vaginal exams, force us into hospital births that we don't want, force us to re-traumatize ourselves. It's already happened. There are already people doing this. There are stories that I could go and dig up out of my archives to show you this. This is just the beginning. It got even worse after the pandemic. And the attitudes, the cultural attitudes, and the brainwashing is what's fueling it. And the empowered birth movement and my 5-pillar system helps you break out of that brainwashing. It helps you find the loopholes. Now, I did promise you a loophole. And I'm not going to disappoint on that. The loophole is simple. When you know that you actually have all the power, because you have the power of choice, even if it's not a great choice, if you go in at the last possible minute, you can birth your baby vaginally and breech. If you want some resources about that, I would suggest you checking out Haley Pierce's book, Breech. It's on Amazon. And going and joining the Coalition for Breech Birth on Facebook. And checking out Breech Without Borders. Those are the best resources. That's where I found a lot of stories of moms who have gone and birthed breech unassisted. Because it does happen. You don't need a breech extraction. You can do it yourself. Breech is just another variation of normal. It's time to stop fearing it. So yeah, you can actually have a breech vaginal birth. Nobody has to touch you. Nobody has to push you into a C-section. And in order to get it, you have to take your power back. No permission needed. And you also have to recognize just how far the medical system will actually go to try to enforce their rules. Because it can and does happen. You can't be naive to that. You can't think that you can just show up and have them support you. You need to really pick your environment. Again, if you want to know more about that, my 5-pillar system tells you about choosing the right environment. Go onto my YouTube channel, go onto my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com. I've put a whole bunch of resources out there. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out and message me. Or, start an argument in the comments. Maybe we'll attract some labor and delivery nurses who have forgotten why they're supposed to be in this in the first place. Or, somebody else. Some OBs. I think they need to be seeing just how much trauma they're really causing. And then see if they actually have the empathy, or if they're a category 5, the care provider who just got in it for the money. All right. That's all I have for you today.